Everybody can see it. You should be able to see it right now. All right, and I can go ahead and begin. First off, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited and really grateful to be presenting to all of you today. Even though I'm on the other side of the world than most of you, it's not every day that you get to talk about what you do and kind of the profession that you're in. So I really appreciate the opportunity. Before we get started, I just wanted to give an overview really quickly about who I am and why I'm here. And I'm going to go over how you can work with hackers to eliminate risk within your organization and help plan for that business continuity that is really prevalent today as we face COVID-19. And really at the end of the entire presentation, I want to show you how hacker-powered security can take your organization to the next level and how that security confidence can be built up when working with hackers. So with that, just a really quick overview of myself. Again, my name is John Bottarini. I'm a senior solutions engineer here at HackerOne, and I'm also a hacker. I started at HackerOne just over 3 years ago as a part-time security analyst. And an analyst at HackerOne really just receives all the vulnerabilities that come in for all our different programs and susses out whether they're valid, whether they're reproducible. After that, for about a year, I moved on to technical program management. I worked hands-on with some of our larger customers, including the US Department of Defense, to help successfully run their bug bounty and vulnerability disclosure programs. And then today, I'm a senior solutions engineer. I really get to work with everyone, not only customers, but also individuals that may be getting interested in cybersecurity. The important thing to remember across all these different roles over all the different years is that at the end of the day, I'm a hacker at heart. So I really have a unique perspective on both sides of the coin, from the program side of running a vulnerability disclosure program or a bug bounty program, and the hacker side on what I expect and what I like to see in programs that utilize hacker-powered security. So with that, the agenda for today and for my session is I want to go over kind of the world we live in and the threats we face today, and talk about who these hackers are and how they can really be motivated to help you and your organization find those security vulnerabilities, and also why you should utilize them. What's the purpose of going down this very different route of utilizing third-party hackers to help find weaknesses? And finally, we'll conclude with how can you best work with these hackers that are out there trying to help you secure your systems? So the future of work is changing very rapidly. And as work from home, that model becomes more of the norm and work becomes more broadly distributed, there's more applications, more system infrastructure that's vulnerable today. Today, we're in a very unique situation because we have almost a global work from home transition in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's more critical and more now than ever that we can rely on our internet connected devices and applications to be secure. And part of that security is that with more people, devices, and systems online, there really exists a larger attack surface for criminals and those looking to do harm. And there's more of a need and a desire to protect those critical systems so that we can make sure that our users and our employees are safe. And that's really where hackers come into the equation. So who are these hackers that I keep referring to? Well, the reality is that if you did a quick Google search, you'll see that the internet isn't really that kind to hackers today. And they don't necessarily hold hackers in high regard. They're most commonly associated with being evil or malicious. If I were to say, hey, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of the word hacker? It might be something like this, but the reality is that it's much different today than what it was in the past. Hackers are no longer just nefarious people in dim lit rooms wearing hoodies. Hackers are global, they're distributed, and they come in many different shapes and sizes. And in order to understand how hackers can help you eliminate risks, we really first need to define what a hacker is. So hackers in its most simplest form are individuals who enjoy the intellectual challenge of creatively overcoming limitations. In our case, we really care the most about technological limitations in the software and the hardware that we need to make sure it's secure. So they come from a variety of places and backgrounds, and in a few slides in the future, we'll see just how diverse this hacker pool is and the skill sets and areas of expertise that they bring to the table. While there are a lot of different types of hackers, I want to focus on the hacker referred to as white hats. And those hackers are the ones that have good intentions and can help defend your assets instead of taking advantage of those weaknesses and utilizing them for harm. So every year at HackerOne specifically, we conduct a poll of all the hackers on our platform, and we have over 600,000 of them today. It's really similar to like a census, and the data that we get back from these polls tell us a lot about the different personalities that perform this crowdsourced security work. So as you can see from this chart, the majority of our hackers are between the ages of 18 to 24, and almost 97% of hackers are under 35. So while it does tend to lean towards a younger crowd, we do have some old school hackers within the mix too that are really well shaped and defined in the skill sets that they hold. In addition to this, there's a lot of hackers from different backgrounds, a lot of different ways that they learn their education. As hackers tend to skew younger in age, the type and level of computer science and programming education has shifted as well. There's a considerable percentage of hackers that studied computer science and programming in school, but more hackers learned how to hack, not from school itself, but from self-directed research rather than a traditional educational setting. I'm kind of a living proof of that. When I was in university, I learned absolutely nothing about security or hacking in my formal education, even though I was doing information science. I would go to school during the day and then learn how to hack at night. And the story is similar for many hackers that are on our platform. In fact, an interesting stat is there's only 6% that have completed a formal class or certification on hacking. And most of those hackers learned online or from a friend. So hacking can be a really lucrative hobby for some or a full-time pursuit. There are full-time hackers that just make their living and income from bug bounties. A majority of the community fits into the first category, spending most of their days working a full-time job. Again, I'm living proof, or as students with a full class load. Over 1/4 of the hackers are students, and another 35% have some security-related job or profession within the industry. Hacking also helps train future cybersecurity workers in the workforce. Since most of the hackers consider themselves to be self-taught, and since formalized cybersecurity engineering educations really have yet to become that commonplace, especially in the US, bug bounty programs and public VDPs give promising hackers the ability to quickly learn and grow and contribute to everyone's increased security. 80% of the hackers on our platform found that they said that they've used or plan to use hacking experiences to help them land a job. And I'm kind of living proof of that, as I'll show you in a future slide. So regardless of what fills their days or what their day jobs are, hackers are spending more and more time hacking as the years go on. 1/3 devote 10 or fewer hours per week, showing how hacking part-time is still common for many practitioners and isn't as common for the full-time folks, although they do exist. More telling is that there's just over 24% of hackers that spend 30 or more hours each week, and that really shows that hackers are taking full-time hacking careers more seriously. For folks like me that have a full-time job and only get to hack usually on the weekend or very late at night, I really fall into the majority where I can only spend just a couple of hours each week hacking on various targets. So I really need to choose my targets carefully and automate some parts of my testing. And I'll get into that a little bit further on how you can really set these hackers for success. So we've talked a lot about these hackers and who these hackers are, but what motivates a hacker to do what they do? Well, before we go any further, the first thing that comes into people's minds is that, well, hackers must just do it for the cash. And while it is a good incentive, that's not always true. From a very similar poll, what we did is that we found the majority of our hackers on our platform say that the main reason that they hack is just for the challenge of trying to find a bug or break something in a controlled manner. And for many of these hackers, the reason for hacking changes over time. When I first got started hacking, I started off doing it for fun. And then I thought to myself, how cool would it be to say that I hacked Facebook or Google? It's easier said than done, I'll tell you that much. I then realized, hey, this whole hacking thing, it could really land me a job. So my reasons for hacking shifted over time as I learned more about the industry and got better. And I really started off to learn more about hacking just out of entertainment and shifted towards more of, hey, this could be a real future job prospect for me. Luckily, I played my cards right, and I was lucky to be where I am today in the cybersecurity field. I'd be remiss to say that hackers don't also hack for the monetary incentives that come with it. And some of our hackers have managed to completely change their lives through the money they have earned putting their hacker skills to work. Some have started their own companies, their own cybersecurity companies. Some have companies that are completely unrelated to cybersecurity. Others have bought houses and cars for family members or for themselves. And of course, pay for education and future development, which is really a common trend that we see amongst our younger hackers as well. The reality is that if you're hearing this and you're saying, whoa, I could earn money doing hacking and I could buy houses and cars, it's not all that easy and it's not all that glamorous. The reality of hacking is sometimes very, very different from what you would expect. You don't typically sit in a dark room with a hoodie and have dollars rain over you. It's a lot of sleepless nights, and sometimes you can go days or weeks without finding everything. But getting back to the topic at hand, why should I use hackers and what value do they really bring me to my organization and my company? We face an unprecedented lack of cybersecurity talent across really the entire world, and it's expected to just get worse as time goes on. In 2018, the global shortage of cybersecurity skill across the world was conservatively estimated to be about 2.9 million. As of November 2019, that number has jumped over 4 million, and it really just keeps growing from there. We face a talent shortage, and that's really where hackers can step in and the global workforce can step in and be your best friend during this times where you may not be able to recruit folks just because there aren't many people out there. The reality is that hackers are global. You no longer need to be constrained to the location that you're headquartered or that you operate out of for talent. They live all across the globe in over 170 different countries, and you don't have testing being performed just during your regular business hours or just after a major release. It's a constant 24/7, 365 form of testing that happens all around the world and as often as you'd like. Hackers are also specialized. There are hackers who are experts in just specific environments, frameworks, and applications. And I always like to tell this story because people really get a kick out of it. There's a hacker that I know, he's 19, and he's really a kid in Kansas. Kansas is a state here in the US, and all he does in every program that he works with, in every single organization that he goes after and helps, he looks for one type of vulnerability, and that's the only type of vulnerability he looks for. It's called a server-side request forgery. That's all he does. He is the foremost expert in my eyes in that vulnerability class. And he just goes from program to organization to company, finding that vulnerability over and over and over again. So imagine as an organization having that level of talent, depth, and skill set target your own assets. It's something that's very, very rare to find, especially if you don't want to pay a premium for that level of talent. And they're also cutting edge. So hackers constantly need to be learning in order to stay competitive and find bugs faster and more effectively than other hackers. Bug bounties especially are super competitive. And as a hacker, you really need to be diverse in a lot of different types of vulnerability classes, unless you're a 19-year-old kid from Kansas who only specializes in one, because it's really a race against time before the bug is found. All of the hackers constantly need to refine their skills and learn over time and have a broad swath of knowledge that they keep consistently updating as more vulnerabilities are found and more frameworks are released. This constant self-development makes it really easy for your organization to find out about the newest cutting edge types of vulnerabilities, sometimes even before they go public. And we've seen that multiple times in some of the vulnerability disclosure programs and bug bounty programs that we have. So by now, I really hope that I've helped you consider the possibility of working with hackers and the value that they can bring. The next question that a lot of folks have is, well, where do I start? Like, how do I start engaging with hackers? And the reality is that there's two different approaches that you can take with this crowdsourced type of security testing. The first approach is probably the most simplest form. It's called vulnerability coordination or a vulnerability disclosure program. It's a more reactive approach by publishing a process that just informs anyone, regardless of whether they're a hacker or just someone using your assets, that there's a way for them to report security vulnerabilities if they found something. So the US Department of Defense, they call this the see something, say something model of the digital world. You could see it as rolling out the welcome mat for hackers to responsibly and safely report security vulnerabilities to you. More increasingly, It's really becoming more of a requirement for compliance in certain industries. The front runners in this area is in the automotive and healthcare. It's very, very common to see in certain frameworks and compliance requirements to have at least a vulnerability disclosure page or a vulnerability disclosure email that someone can report a security vulnerability to you. The government is also very popular in that space as well here in the United States. If we shift over to the bug bounty aspect, bug bounty is an extension to vulnerability coordination. And by this time, you're kind of taking it to the next level by actively incentivizing the largest community of hackers in the world to perform continuous security research on your products. And the reality is that you are offering cash rewards if they find a valid vulnerability. You could say this is a much more proactive approach, and it's probably one of the best ways for your engineers to learn more about the security of the products they're building, because in my opinion, there's no better way for learning than getting practical real-world examples of mistakes or errors that you and your teammates have made and have been disclosed to you or reported through your bug bounty program. If you're doing penetration testing, a bug bounty may help you save cost. It allows you to pay for results rather than time spent by security consulting. And it's supposed to be a complementary part of the pen testing as well. So it's not meant to be a complete replacement. In all of these situations, regardless of what type of crowdsourced security testing you're looking for or what type you really lean towards, it's supposed to be the cherry on top of your software development lifecycle and really complement not only the internal processes that you have to build secure software, but also your security audits, your pen tests, and your vulnerability assessments as well. So there's two different types of each one of these different crowdsourced security models. For one half of the organizations that we work with, they prefer to have a private bug bounty program. And this is an invite only. It's really a more structured way to only invite some of the researchers to your program if you want to control the number of results or you don't want to overwhelm your development teams with the number of vulnerabilities. If you've matured and you progress past this point and you're comfortable being more public, a public bug bounty or vulnerability disclosure program allows anybody to submit a report regardless of their level of skill set or regardless of whether or not they're a hacker. A public bug bounty program, again, is a sign of a very mature security program, and it usually takes a couple months to a year for a program to move from private to public. So I want to walk through an example, and I want to ask, what happens if someone finds a bug or a vulnerability in one of your assets today? What now? What do they do? I like to call this the hierarchy of disclosure. If someone finds a vulnerability in your asset today, there's really two levels of effort that they can perform to try and responsibly disclose this issue to you. At the lowest form of effort, there is Googling the company name and how do I report a security issue to them. This works maybe 1 out of 10 times. You can go through the WHOIS records and try to email like the domain administrator. You can just send a blind message to the CEO and hope that he's reading his email that day. Or you could go towards social media and try to reach out that way. The high effort is you try to go through like a LinkedIn email or LinkedIn message. We have a disclosure, a responsible disclosure for one, which allows a researcher to utilize our internal resources to try to find someone at the affected organization. Or you could go through an organization like CERT, which really tries to connect different organizations that might be at risk to those ethical hackers who are trying to report vulnerabilities to you. The reality is that organizations realize that this is a problem, and sometimes there is no correct way to report the vulnerability responsibly. So they proactively use vulnerability disclosure programs and bug bounty programs as the solution. And Asia Pacific really leads the way. There's over 1,800 hacker-powered security programs across the globe, and Asia Pacific really leads the pack with a bunch of different companies and organizations like Mindef, Nintendo, Vend, Grab. We just had an engagement with GovTech. And this past year alone, the hacker-powered security programs have grown about 30% in the Asia Pacific region, with the Government Technology Agency of Singapore, GovTech, really leading the way with bug bounty challenges in the HackerOne platform. The logos that you see on this page are really just a small snippet of groups that we work with, as there are only 30% of our publics that are only 30% of our programs that are public at one time. So for all these logos you see here, there's another 70% in the background that run private engagements. Altogether, on HackerOne specifically, there's 189 hackers that have earned just under $100,000 in exchange for reporting 625 distinct security weaknesses to the 5 Singaporean government challenges. Here's just a small snippet, and these programs come in different flavors. GovTech, they ran a see something, say something approach with their vulnerability disclosure program. Line and Nintendo, they're actively incentivizing hackers through their bug bounty programs. Regardless of what model you choose and what you decide to do, hackers are here and they're ready to find bugs, and you just need to open the door and let them have an outlet to share their findings with you. If you want to learn more about any of the resources that I talked about within this presentation, or just discover more about how hackers can help you or your organization, here's some really helpful resources I absolutely recommend checking out. The 2019 Hacker Security Report, the 2020 Hacker Report. Also, feel free to shoot me an email. If you follow me on Twitter, it's just my name, John_Bottarini. I also have a link to my blog there where I write up some of the security vulnerabilities that I found personally. With that, I want to turn it back just to a question and answer and see if there's any questions that I can help answer as I'm on the call and presenting today.
Well, thank you, John. So we're taking questions now. Any questions from the audience? Some people also shoot us an email. Oh. Maybe give me 1 second. I'm just
Sure.
reading all these emails coming in now. Okay, we have one right now. How do hackers choose program or organization they want to hack on? So
yes. So in terms of like what program they're trying to hack on, the different programs that are out there. Got it. So sometimes it comes down to personal preference based on industry or technology. I know some hackers who really like going after financial institutions and banks because they're familiar with the common technologies and the frameworks that the banks use. Everyone has a flavor of bugs that they like finding. One example, my favorite, is privilege escalation. So if I've given an application that has a bunch of user roles, a lot of restrictions in place, and a very large attack surface, I would find this more exciting than, say, compared to a single mobile application. The reality is that there's some hackers out there that have the completely opposite approach than I do, and they may totally prefer just that single iOS or Android app because that's their specialty and that's the flavor of bugs that they like to find.
Okay, so there's no stereotyping. They can just, you don't really know what they.
It's totally, that's the benefit of a bug bounty program or a VDP. You really get to choose from anything you feel put it in and what you really enjoy hacking, and right. That's it's different for everyone.
All right. So second question is, how do I keep my hacker power security program interesting for hacker? So you
okay. Yeah. That's a good question. A lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot. Some organizations feel that when you run one of these programs, it's kind of like a set it and forget it. Like, oh, let's just put a security ad email up there and forget it, and let's never try to update it or put more things out there. And I think that's really challenging. If you want to keep hackers engaged and interesting for the hack bonuses, if they're a bug bounty program, and kind of make it like a competition. If a hacker can find a specific issue within that asset, a good example is a bank that we had, a private program. They ran a competition where they were willing to offer $1,000 for any hacker that could access a specific account that they had and transfer money from that account outside of the account. That bonus was claimed pretty quickly, but it really just goes to show that that's one of the ways you can make it interesting for hackers. It's not just money. Sometimes if you add more assets into scope, or you kind of provide more information, like, hey, here's what we're really looking for in terms of the vulnerabilities that we'd like to find, that's also a good challenge for the hackers as well, and keeps it interesting.
It's almost like a traditional, carrot or stick.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, John, can you see the questions on the chat application there?
Yeah. Do you want me to answer the specific applications and tools?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, I love that one. So there's definitely a broad swath of tools and applications that you can use for hacking. I don't want to kind of self-promote too much, but if you go on my Twitter, there's a lot more tools that I use personally. Burp Suite is kind of like a de facto tool that everyone uses. There's a few folks that use Kali Linux. I like some of the more built in-house tools that some of the hackers have come up with. There's a really popular tool called Lazy Recon that was built by one of our hackers internally at HackerOne. So the different applications and tools really depends on what you're hacking as well. If you're going after a mobile application, you're probably going to use something like Frida. If you're going after a web application, let's say it's WordPress, there's a whole cache of WordPress tools you can use out there to target different attacks. But I think regardless of what you're going after, Burp is probably going to be your best step and your starting point.
All right, let's answer Atlee question then. How to retain good hackers?
Yeah, so this is the $1 million question, right? Because with 600,000 hackers out there, how do you find and retain the best ones? As one commenter answered, swag is always a good incentive, but the other incentive is being really transparent with hackers and outlining what you're looking to get out of the program. And I think this is where programs really fall short if they try to do it themselves, because a lot of the hackers, as I mentioned, like in my prior slides, they do this out of like competition and to challenge themselves to find more security vulnerabilities and to grow. So in order to attract and retain the best hackers out there, giving them a reason and saying, hey, we're really looking for this type of vulnerability. Here's what we've seen in the past. And this is how we can really help you learn more about this ecosystem that we're hosted on. And in return, help us find vulnerabilities. Defining that really well within, if you have a policy or you have an email, it's really hard to do. And I think that's why if you're going to do this yourself or work with a partner, defining to hackers what matters most to you is how you attract and retain the best ones. If you have a fair program that's transparent, that wants to work with ethical researchers across the world, the good hackers will come. The good hackers will be retained. And if you treat those hackers like people that are there to help you, they will stay with your program. We call them anchor hackers, because sometimes these hackers only stay with a certain program because they have a good relationship with that program manager or with that company. And swag helps as well.
All right, so there's a question from Mr. Ng. What is the probability risk from hacking on system hosted on cloud, i.e. Azure, Amazon Web System, or GCP versus non-premium setup?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if I understand the question completely. The probability risk, like the percentage of finding a vulnerability, or the percentage of configuring one of these systems incorrectly. I think that's what the question is asking. So I'll answer that. It depends on your specific setup. Like obviously, if you have an on-prem system, you want to make sure that your own internally security engineers are making sure that that's secure and they're not releasing that to anybody in the world to access. If you're moving towards like a cloud system, especially on AWS or Azure, you don't really have to worry about the server security as much as you would as an on-prem system, but you still need to worry about how your applications are interacting with that cloud environment. That's kind of why we say sometimes leave the actual server side vulnerabilities to the Amazon engineers, focus on how that application interacts with your systems and applications you have set up. I'm not sure if that's entirely what the question asker was asking, but that's my best response for that.
Okay.
It all depends on how
you go back to Mr. later, but there are a few questions, actually one from Alan and one from Brad, and there's a few also emailers as well. It's all about can we really trust a hacker? So Alan was asking, how do we ensure that a hacker does not go rogue and with help vulnerability profit later? And Brad was asking, how do you determine the difference between ethical hacker and who isn't screening their program?
It's such a good question, and I get asked this question every single time. The answer is that hackers are here to help because they're incentivized to follow the rules, rewarded in recognition, money, or experience in doing the right thing. A malicious hacker would never want to engage in a bug bounty program or a vulnerability disclosure program because they want to fly as under the radar as possible in order to have a higher probability of their attack succeeding. A bug bounty program or a vulnerability disclosure program is probably the worst news in the world for a malicious criminal, because instead of being a lone wolf attacking a system that's already online, they're now competing with hundreds or potentially thousands of other hackers out there trying to do good. By creating a safe way for outsiders to submit vulnerabilities, your organization receives bug reports that you wouldn't otherwise know about. And for the people that have advantage over the rest of us, they can think like an attacker. I like to say for every malicious hacker, there's 100 hackers willing to help and make the world a safer place. And if you do require more advanced vetting and control over who's attacking your assets or who's going after those assets that you have publicly, we do have some different controls internally to limit who participates. So if you have a private program, we can go through background checks and we can go over VPN to give you that higher level of assurance. And to answer the second question, how do you determine the difference between an ethical hacker and one who isn't when screening them for a program? I want to be as vendor neutral as I can, so I don't want to speak like completely on behalf of HackerOne, but we have our own system internally to gauge hackers based on reputation and the vulnerabilities they submitted in the past. This is especially important for a private program. If you're out there and running your own bug bounty program or your vulnerability disclosure program, it's a lot harder. And I think regardless of whether you go with a vendor or regardless if you do it yourself, the most important thing is to treat every attack as if it were a real attack, and don't give special access or incentives to anyone that's attacking your system. So treat every single intrusion or attack as a potential attack, and wait and put the defenses in place that you have to protect against it, because that's what a hacker would expect, and it's not what a criminal wants.
Okay. John, thank you so much for this particular interesting sessions.
Absolutely.
We do have more questions coming in, but I'll show it to you later. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, that joining this particular webinar. I think in total, last count, we have about 67 people joining this your session.
Thank you.
We do want to basically do a poll, so anyone basically can go to the poll and vote for the questions that we basically put on polls. That would be great. John, any last words before we close this particular webinar?
I just want to thank everyone again so much for all your great questions and for having me. It's been really, really great. And hopefully in the future, we can talk on Twitter or discuss more about hacker-powered security. So thanks again.
Okay. Again, today's webinar is not completely finished. So the next session is about securing your remote access at 10:10. So 10:10. So log back in at around 10 o'clock or 10:05, and we'll basically resume this particular sessions. Once again, thanks, John, and hopefully stay safe, healthy, and hope to see you in person soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks. You too.